Will you drink to the earth and to the days which have passed upon it? Will you drink to the fullness which was and to friends who have passed on?
They believe that you should not have a firearm to protect yourself, but you should pay for them to have firearms to protect them. They don't believe that your children should be educated. They believe that they should be indoctrinated. They're dragging up that hill all types of things. CRT, transgenderism, this idea of serving people. Who in the world came up with that garbage? And when the times get tough, you had best believe that Americans get told, just like they did on Little Round Top. They don't lay down, they don't back up, they don't quit.
Do we have a problem in this country with election integrity?
Yes.
And what is the problem?
The problem is that machines can be hacked. And by the way, this has become a partisan issue recently where the Republicans are complaining about it and the Democrats aren't. But 5 years ago, it was the opposite. I mean, every Democrat believed in his heart and in his head that the 2001 election was stolen from Al Gore. So both sides are complaining about it, and we ought to be able to fix it. We put a man on the moon. We have ATMs on every corner in every city, and they never miscount. They never give you more money than you want.
What do you think about the fact that all of a sudden, and it seems all of a sudden to me, maybe it's not, we have ballot harvesting where people are going around and collecting ballots. What happened to just having elections where people show up and vote? If somebody's infirm, absolutely okay. Don't put resistance in front of people. But now it seems like it's just wholesale. How do you oversee that? It just seems like it's ripe for fraud as opposed to where you have someone overseeing it.
Yeah, and we need to fix that. And it's easy to fix. You need to have paper ballots. And you need a low threshold for a recount so that if anybody says, that there was a problem here, you need to, it triggers a recount and a right to a recount. The other thing, I'm going to do this when I get into office. One of the big issues that separate, all this is happening, Phil, because of the divide. Everybody knows that we need a election system that all Americans have total faith in, that above anything else, and when you cast your vote, it's going to be counted. We don't have that. We don't have it because Republicans and Democrats aren't sitting down with each other and saying, what do we need to do to make this happen? Instead, they're taking sides. And let me give you an idea of one of the solutions for this. One of the issues is voter ID. Democrats don't like voter ID and demand a requirement for voter ID at the voting booth. Why not? The reason for that is because there are tens of millions of people in this country who are eligible to vote, but they don't have government-issued photo ID. They don't have driver's licenses. Most of them are Democratic constituencies. They're elderly people whose licenses have expired. They're young students, and they're urban minorities who don't have a driver's license because they don't need one. And so what I'm going to do the day I get into office, I'm going to order the State Department and the Post Office to begin issuing passport cards to any American who can't afford them for free. The passport card is a government-issued photo ID. There's no vaccine information or medical information. It's just an ID. That's going to solve three huge problems. One, if you don't have a government-issued photo ID in this country, you are a second-class citizen. You can't open a bank account. You can't pick up your kids at school. You can't go to a hotel. You can't get on an airplane. Number two, if we had a government-issued photo ID, it would solve a lot of the problems of the border. Because right now,
sure would.
An employer is criminally liable if they hire an undocumented immigrant. And then the third is the election integrity issue. So my team has reached out to civil rights leaders, leading civil rights leaders around the country, Al Sharpton, Andrew Young, and others, and said, if I issue this government-issued photo ID, will you withdraw your objection to demanding photo ID at the voting booth? And they've said yes. Problem solved.
Well, I agree. Then you're saying do that instead of having all these mail-in ballots and ballot harvesting.
Anything where there's a hole in election integrity, we got to get rid of it. We got to encourage as many people to vote.
Should we be concerned that a third of Americans, almost a third of Americans, have a lack of confidence in
Yeah, I
that
mean,
votes are going to be counted?
catastrophe for democracy, isn't it?
Yeah, Scott Rasmussen has done a poll, and he asked people the following, and this is really disturbing to me. The question was, is it okay to win an election by cheating? 7% of all Americans said yes. 35% of elites said yes, and that was defined by they made $150,000 a year, they were urban dwellers and postgraduates. 69% said yes if they made $150,000 a year, were urban dwellers, postgraduates who talked politics on a daily basis. 69% of those that were active in politics said, yeah, it was okay if my candidate had to cheat to win. You could knock me over with a feather. What the hell are people thinking?
I got a lot of those kind of surprises during COVID because I learned how many people were okay with government censoring speech, with government closing down every church in this country, with government closing our schools when we're already having a mental health crisis with our kids.
The people that shut the schools down are the same people that collects data that told them we had the highest levels of anxiety, depression, and loneliness among young people since we had started keeping records. And they shut down the school systems, which is where those kids get their stimulation. It's where they learn to interact. It's where they do competition. And it's also where we have mandated reporters who keep their eyes on them and watch for abuse and sexual molestation. Yeah. And instead, we took those eyes off of those kids, sent them home behind closed doors, abandoning them to the very abusers that we were watching for, and referrals for that kind of care dropped to like 50% across the country.
It was the only indicia of social disintegration that actually improved because we stopped counting the abuse.
It just stopped getting reported that much.
It probably got worse.
Of course it did. We abandoned those kids to their abusers, and their answer from Fauci and others was, well, we're doing the best we can with what we know. No, they were not doing the best they can with what they knew. They had no plan to reopen the schools when they closed them down. And they just had a new hammer and everything looked like a nail. And so they just started shutting this business, shutting this school, shutting this, and the teachers' unions were wielding the power. Do you believe that our educational system is on the brink of catastrophic collapse?
I think it's already collapsed. I think, the outcomes that you just inventoried is evidence of a utter collapse of the system. We can fix the system, but you need to do something disruptive.
Which, of course, takes money. And I want to talk about money. When your uncle was president, he seemed to have the idea that a lower tax rate brought about a higher tax revenue. What's your view on that?
I'm not going to raise the tax rates in this country. I may switch around some of the tax burdens to incentivize the best behavior, but I'm not going to raise taxes. We want to lower tax rates as much as possible. We have a $34 trillion debt, and we can't just print money. I saw President Trump on your show, and it was a very amazing, and it was an amazing show, and I think you really bring out the best in people. And I know that's your objective. But he was talking about how strong the economy was during his administration. But he printed $8 trillion, which is more than all presidents combined from George Washington to George W. Bush in 283 years of history. So it's pretty easy to produce the illusion of wealth if you're stealing money from future generations. And printing money like that is just theft. That can't be our solution.
How much has the Biden administration printed?
$6.3 billion today, but they will beat President Trump. Yeah, that's right. What's wrong? And it's addiction to war. It's the chronic disease epidemic, the biggest cost. That's costing us $4.3 trillion. We have to end that. We have to, or we're dead. It's 4.3. It's 5 times our military budget. We've gone from 6% of GDP to healthcare to about 18%. And 6% when my uncle was president, 18% today, and it's growing exponentially. And we are we spend more on healthcare than any other country in the world, 2 or 3 times per capita what the Europeans, and we're 79th in health outcomes. We're behind Costa Rica, we're behind Mongolia, we're behind Cuba, we're behind Nicaragua.
How
We're the
is that
sickest
even
country in the world.
possible? There are 50 countries in the world where a mother has a better chance of surviving childbirth than America. 51 countries in the world where the infant has a better chance of surviving than America. America!
We have extraordinary doctors in this country, extraordinary, that are doing things that are incredibly innovative. But we have the worst health outcomes. It's because of chronic disease. And we've got to figure out what's causing it, eliminate it. We have, and it's not rocket science, it's glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup. It's neonicotinoid pesticides. It's atrazine. It's PFOAs, the forever chemicals that are in all of our child's pajamas. They're in our furniture. I've litigated on them as well. It's high fructose corn syrup.
These other countries don't have that?
No, if you want to drink a Coke, drink a Mexican Coke, because they don't allow it down there. There's 1,000 ingredients in our food that are banned in Europe. And we're poisoning, we're mass poisoning an entire generation of kids. These kids are obese. It's not because they suddenly got lazy. It's not because, we're mass poisoning them. And even if you found out that high fructose corn syrup was the cause of, a large cause of the obesity epidemic and diabetes epidemic, could you do anything about it? That's the question. Can you use power? And I know I can do it, and I'll tell you how. And all the things that I promise when I'm running are things that I can do without the help of Congress, because I know how things work, and I know you can't count on Congress anymore. I'm going to go down to NIH, and I'm going to say to them, we're going to find out what's causing these, and we're going to do a lot of science on them. Once you have that science that makes that causal connection between an exposure and an injury, you pass a threshold in the federal court called the Daubert threshold, which allows attorneys to bring lawsuits. When we brought the Monsanto lawsuit, everybody said you can never get Roundup. They're too powerful. The first case we won $289 million on. The second case we won $89 million. The third case we asked the jury for $1 billion and they gave us $2.2 billion. And then Monsanto came to the negotiating table and they agreed to remove glyphosate from home gardening products. You can't do it through Congress. You can do it by generating enough really high quality, good quality science so that the attorneys can come in and do it. And it's the market fixing the problem rather than government.
Yeah. The thing that I'm concerned about is if we're trying to get government to fix all of this, then government's just going to get bigger and bigger and have a bigger role in people's lives and more control in people's lives. And it seems to me that's the last thing we want. If you want something fixed, it seems to me if we let enterprising people work on it, enterprising people try to figure things out, they'll do it faster and cheaper than the government.
So, yeah, and you're right. The service on our debt now, that $34 trillion of debt, incidentally, President Biden is adding another $1 trillion every 90 days. That's the burn rate we have. It's insane. Right now, we're paying more to serve that debt, the interest on that debt, than our military budget. Within 5 years, President Trump and President Biden contributed that debt by thinking it was okay to shut down an economy for 500 days and then just print money. Inflation is a tax, and it's a regressive tax. It taxes people on fixed incomes. It taxes working people. It's theft. It is stealing our money.